Thompson family had only been living in their new Minnesota home for a few weeks when strange things began to happen in the nursery. It was an older house, built in the late 1950s, and though it had been renovated recently, there were still hints of its history in the creaky floorboards and thick plaster walls. For the most part, John and Emily Thompson were thrilled to raise their 9-month-old daughter, Lily, in the quiet suburb. But there was one thing they couldn't explain. Each night, as the couple tucked Lily into her crib, she would begin to act oddly. At first, it was small things. She would roll onto her stomach and stare at the wall beside her crib, with wide, unblinking eyes. Then, she started reaching for that wall, pointing her tiny fingers toward it and babbling as if someone or something was behind it. John assumed it was just a phase, maybe Lily's imagination or a reflection of light that caught her attention. But Emily wasn't so sure. One evening, just as the couple sat down to watch a movie downstairs, a sharp sound came through the baby monitor. It wasn't crying or cooing, it was a low, scratching noise, almost like something clawing lightly against a surface. Emily sat upright immediately and looked at the monitor screen. Lily was sitting in her crib, still and silent, facing the wall again, but the sound continued. John paused the movie and turned up the monitor volume. The sound was faint, but steady. It didn't match the noises old houses typically made. There was no wind, no pipes rattling, and no trees brushing the siding. It was too precise, too focused. Emily looked at John, concerned. "I think we should check it out," she said. Already heading upstairs, they entered the nursery quietly, so as not to startle Lily. She turned to look at them, then turned back to the wall, her little hand patting it as if encouraging them to listen. Emily stepped closer and pressed her ear against the painted surface. At first, she heard nothing, then came the sound again. A low, scraping shuffle, like something gently brushing against the inside of the wall. John tapped the drywall with his knuckle. It gave a slightly hollow sound in the middle section. "Probably a mouse," he said. "Or maybe the HVAC is acting up." But Emily wasn't convinced. Something about Lily's focus unsettled her. The baby wasn't afraid, she was calm, even curious. Over the next few nights, the pattern continued. The scratching sound became more regular, often late in the evening. Lily would crawl to the base of the wall if she was on the floor, place her ear against it, and giggle softly. Then came the night that changed everything. It was around 2 a.m. when Lily's wail rang out through the baby monitor. Emily and John rushed to the nursery, fearing the worst. They found Lily standing in her crib, tears running down her cheeks, pointing desperately at the wall. Her sobs weren't the usual cries of hunger or discomfort. They were urgent, insistent. John picked her up to comfort her, but she kept reaching out, her tiny hand trembling. In that moment, something inside Emily snapped. She had tried to reason it away long enough. She walked over and knocked on the wall herself. The response chilled her to the bone. A faint thud came from the other side. It wasn't random, it was rhythmic, deliberate. 1, 2, 3 thuds, spaced perfectly apart, as if answering her knock. John's eyes widened. He placed Lily back in the crib, grabbed a flashlight, and examined the wall up close. There were no visible seams or damage, no air vents or crawl spaces, just smooth, painted drywall. "I'm calling Mike in the morning," John said. Mike was his friend who worked in home renovations. "If something's in there, we're getting it out." That night, neither of them slept well. Every creak of the house felt louder. The baby slept only when her crib was pushed closer to the wall, and even then, her small hand rested against it until she drifted off. Emily sat watching her for hours, heart pounding, unable to look away. She didn't know what was behind that wall, but whatever or whoever was in there, she was beginning to think their daughter knew it better than anyone, and somehow, she wasn't afraid. The next morning, the air inside the Thompson home felt heavy with unease. Emily couldn't shake off the feeling that something was watching them through the wall. John, trying to stay practical, called his friend Mike and explained what had happened the night before. Mike agreed to stop by later that afternoon with some tools and a moisture detector to check for hollow spaces or structural damage. He joked lightly about it possibly being a ghost dog or something, but Emily didn't laugh. She had a strange feeling this wasn't just creaky drywall or a rodent issue. Meanwhile, Lily's behavior became even more unusual. During breakfast, she sat in her high chair quietly, not throwing her usual pieces of scrambled egg on the floor or giggling at the family cat. Her eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, as if listening for something. Every time a noise echoed from upstairs, whether the heater clicking on or a branch brushing the side of the house, she would whip her head toward the nursery, tense and alert. After breakfast, Emily brought Lily into the living room to play with her toys, but instead of crawling around like she usually did, Lily made a direct line toward the hallway, then to the nursery door. She placed her hand on it and began tapping lightly, looking back at her mother and making soft babbling noises. Emily's heart skipped. It was almost as if Lily wanted her to follow, so she did. Lily crawled into the nursery and went straight to the same section of the wall beside the crib. She pressed her ear against it and smiled. Then she sat down, clapped her hands twice, and stared at it. Emily knelt beside her and tried to imitate her actions. When she pressed her own ear against the wall, she could hear something again more clearly this time. It was not just scratching, it was breathing, slow, steady, and heavy, like that of a large animal. Emily pulled back suddenly, her heart pounding. She didn't say a word to Lily, who was now patting the wall gently and humming in her baby voice. Instead, she stood up and called John, "Come upstairs, right now." When John entered and repeated the test, he turned pale. "That's not a mouse," he said under his breath. "That's something alive, big." By mid-afternoon, Mike arrived with his toolbox and scanner. He ran the detector along the section of wall and frowned. "There's a large air gap in there," he said. "It could be a sealed space, maybe something from an old renovation." He tapped the wall and added, "You want me to open it?" John hesitated. "Let's wait until morning. I want Lily to stay at my sister's tonight, just in case. This doesn't feel right." They packed Lily's bag and dropped her off that evening. For the first time in weeks, the nursery was quiet. No noises, no scratching, no thudding responses. But it wasn't comforting, it was eerie. Emily and John tried to sleep but couldn't. Just after midnight, the scratching started again, louder this time. It didn't fade. It moved up and down the wall, almost like pacing. And then came the sound that turned John cold, a low, throaty whimper, like that of a dog in distress. They turned on the lights, and both stood silently in the hallway, staring at the nursery door. Inside, the scratching continued. The next morning, they picked Lily up and brought her home. The moment she was back in the house, she turned calm again. No tears, no fuss. She reached for Emily and made the sign she often used when she wanted to go to her crib. Emily brought her into the nursery. What happened next shocked them both. Lily crawled over to the wall, placed her hand against it, and said one word, "Dog." It was the first clear word she had ever spoken. Emily gasped. John knelt down beside her, stunned. Before they could react further, a soft, sorrowful howl came from the wall, muffled, but unmistakably real. Emily turned to John, her eyes wide. "There's something living in there, John, and it's been waiting a long time." He stood up and said firmly, "We're opening that wall." Today, the mystery had grown too strange to ignore, and they were about to uncover something no one could have imagined. John didn't waste a minute. The next morning, as soon as the sun rose, he cleared the furniture from the nursery and called Mike again. Emily held Lily in her arms, standing just outside the room, her eyes locked on the spot where the breathing and scratching had come from night after night. Even in the daylight, the wall seemed heavier, like it held a story waiting to be told. Mike arrived quickly, tools in hand. He had brought a small inspection camera and a cutting tool to minimize damage. "We'll drill a small hole and take a look inside," he said, masking his own curiosity with a professional tone. With John's help, he carefully drilled a hole in the drywall where the hollow sound was strongest. As the drill bit broke through, a sudden rush of stale, warm air escaped. It smelled faintly of dust, insulation, and something else, something living. Mike inserted the inspection camera and maneuvered it around, watching the live feed on his tablet. At first, they saw nothing but pink insulation and wooden studs. Then, they all froze. Two brown eyes stared directly into the camera lens. "What the?" Mike breathed, his hand trembling slightly. John stepped forward. "Is it a raccoon?" Mike shook his head slowly. "No, it's a dog." Emily clutched Lily tighter, stunned. "A dog." Inside the wall, Mike adjusted the camera angle. The footage clearly showed a large German shepherd crouched between the studs, his body curled tightly, surrounded by insulation. The dog didn't growl or bark. He simply stared into the lens, blinking slowly, his ears perked and alert but calm. His fur was matted, but he wasn't thrashing or panicking. John ran a hand through his hair. How long has he been in there? Long enough to lose weight, Mike said, but he's still breathing. That's the miracle. Without waiting any longer, Mike carefully widened the hole. Emily stepped back, unsure if the dog might be frightened or aggressive. But as soon as Mike peeled away enough drywall, the dog shifted forward. He didn't lunge or bark. He simply crawled out slowly, his limbs stiff and shaky. His large frame revealed signs of hunger and dehydration, but his tail wagged faintly. He paused, looked at each of them, then walked staggered, rear toward Lily, who was now on the floor beside her mother. The German Shepherd lowered his head gently and pressed his nose against Lily's tiny hand, and Lily giggled. The moment felt surreal. A dog had just emerged from a wall, and instead of panic or fear, there was peace, connection, as if he had been waiting just for her. Emily was speechless. How did he even get in there? Mike inspected the open space. This must have been part of a closed-off crawl space. Maybe during renovations, someone accidentally sealed it while the dog was inside. He might have been trapped in there for a long time, unless... He trailed off. John looked at him. Unless what? Mike hesitated. Unless someone left him there intentionally. But there's no sign of trauma, and the wall looked professionally sealed. It might have just been an accident that was never discovered. Emily sat down on the floor, watching the dog gently lie down beside Lily, his body finally relaxing. He's been surviving all this time, and no one ever knew. Mike nodded slowly. He must have had access to moisture somewhere inside, maybe from condensation or a small pipe leak. But food, that's the part I can't explain. Lily crawled closer and rested against the dog's side. He didn't move. He just rested his head on his paws and closed his eyes. Emily's voice was soft. He waited for someone to find him, and somehow, she knew he was there all along. Animal Control was called to do a quick health check. The officer who arrived was amazed by the dog's condition. He's lucky, she said, and smart, very calm for what he's been through. She scanned for a microchip. His name is Rex. He's registered to someone who lived here years ago. The puzzle was starting to piece together, but the mystery wasn't over. The Thompsons had just uncovered a hidden chapter of their home's past, one buried within its very walls, and Lily had been the first to hear it. The atmosphere inside the Thompson home shifted dramatically after Rex's rescue. What had once been a peaceful family dwelling now carried the weight of mystery and awe. Neighbors, friends, even the mail carrier all heard about the dog found sealed inside the nursery wall. But while others focused on the miracle of his survival, the Thompsons were still grappling with a single question. How had Rex ended up in there? The dog himself was remarkably calm despite the trauma he had endured. He wasn't aggressive. He didn't cower. He simply stayed close to Lily at all times, as if he had imprinted on her. Emily found it touching and real, even the way he followed the baby's every movement. When Lily napped, Rex lay beside her crib. When she cried, he whimpered softly and licked her hand until she stopped. It was as though he had always belonged in the family. The veterinarian who first examined Rex was baffled. He's severely underweight, but his vitals are surprisingly strong. I've seen strays in worse shape after just a few weeks. Judging by his condition, he's been surviving off very little, but somehow he adapted. Rex had no serious injuries, only mild dehydration and signs of prolonged confinement. The vet guessed he'd been in the wall for at least a few weeks, possibly longer. That's when things took another strange turn. A local animal rescue volunteer named Helen stopped by after hearing about the dog's microchip scan. She held a manila folder with faded records and introduced herself as someone who had once worked with a retired Army veteran named Walter Green, the same man who once owned the Thompson house. Walter had a dog, she said, placing an old photo on the kitchen table. This is Rex. He was Walter's service animal after his time overseas. They were inseparable. The black and white photo showed a much younger Rex sitting beside a proud, uniformed man with kind eyes. Emily and John leaned in, stunned by the resemblance. It was him, Helen continued. Walter passed away about 5 years ago from a heart attack. He lived here alone after retirement. The dog disappeared shortly after, and we always assumed he ran away during the chaos. The house went up for sale and changed owners twice since then. Emily looked toward the nursery. Are you saying Rex has been here the whole time? Helen nodded solemnly. It's possible, if a contractor or new owner began sealing off. Parts of the house, especially if the crawl spaces were being renovated, they might not have known he was there. John couldn't believe what he was hearing. 5 years, that's impossible. He wouldn't have survived that long. Helen agreed. Not without help. Which is why I doubt he was in the wall the entire 5 years. He might have found refuge in the crawl space or between the walls at some point after Walter's death. He could have been hiding, traumatized by his owner's sudden absence, moving quietly between unseen pockets in the structure. Mike, who had returned to inspect the crawl space further, called from the hallway, "You guys should see this." They followed him down to the basement, where he pointed to a narrow access hatch tucked behind an old cabinet. "This leads to a crawl area that runs up behind the nursery wall. I'd bet anything this was where Rex was hiding before getting trapped." The space was narrow, dark, and dusty, but it connected to the wall cavity upstairs. Mike explained that during the most recent renovation done just before the Thompsons moved, in several vents and small access panels were sealed up for aesthetic purposes. It was likely that Rex had been inside one of those crawl spaces when the final wall was closed. John shook his head slowly. He must have gotten sealed in without anyone knowing. That's why he started scratching. He was trying to get out. Emily glanced down at Lily, who was now holding onto Rex's ear gently, giggling as if they were old friends. And somehow, Lily heard him, even when no one else did. Helen smiled. Some bonds form in the most unlikely ways. Maybe Rex stayed quiet until he heard someone worth responding to. Rex raised his head slightly and wagged his tail, his eyes resting on Lily with a calm intensity. There was something in his gaze and awareness, a depth that gave Emily goosebumps. Those weren't just the eyes of a dog that had been stuck in darkness. Those were the eyes of someone who had waited patiently, quietly, for a light to return. That light had come in the form of a baby who couldn't speak yet, but somehow knew exactly where to listen. In the days following Rex's rescue, the Thompson home became a quiet center of reflection. Though life returned to its normal rhythm, diaper changes, grocery runs, and late-night feedings, there was now a silent guest who had claimed his place beside Lily like he'd always been there. Rex moved through the house with ease, adjusting quickly, but never straying far from the nursery. He had survived the impossible, and the family could feel that his presence meant more than coincidence. Emily, still shaken by the discovery, felt an urge to know more. The old photo of Walter Green and Rex lingered in her mind. There had to be more to their story. So one evening, while Lily napped with Rex curled up protectively beside her crib, Emily dug through the local public archives and property records. Online, what she found stunned her. Walter Green had been a decorated war veteran who served 2 tours overseas. After retiring, he had adopted Rex from a military working dog program. Several newspaper articles showed Rex at Walter's side during charity events, therapy visits, and local school talks. They weren't just man and dog, they were a team that had spent years helping others. The most touching article was dated 3 years before Walter's passing. It described how Rex had once saved Walter's life during a late-night fire by alerting him in time to escape. It made Emily's chest ache. This wasn't just any dog. Rex had already been a hero long before Lily was even born. Later that evening, Emily shared everything with John. He listened in silence, glancing at the living room, where Rex now rested with his head in Lily's lap as she played with building blocks. "He must have stayed behind when Walter died," John said quietly. "He didn't run away. He waited." That night, they reached out to Walter's only known relative, his niece, Claire, who lived in a nearby town. When she arrived the next morning, her eyes filled with tears the moment she saw Rex. "I can't believe this," Claire whispered, kneeling to hug the dog. "We all thought he'd run off out of grief. We searched for weeks. I had no idea he stayed here all this time." Rex responded with a gentle wag of his tail and nuzzled her cheek. It was a reunion filled with emotion, yet something was different. Claire noticed it too. "He remembers me," she said, "but he's bonded to her now." Motioning to Lily, "He's chosen her." The Thompsons offered to let Claire take Rex home if she wanted, but she declined without hesitation. "I think he's where he's supposed to be, and I think Walter would have wanted that too." As the days passed, Rex settled in completely. He was taken to the vet regularly for checkups and slowly began regaining weight and strength. But even as his body healed, it was his spirit that amazed everyone the most. He didn't bark unnecessarily. He didn't show signs of anxiety or trauma. Instead, he moved with quiet purpose, especially around Lily. He would wake with her in the morning, nap beside her in the afternoon, and sit patiently at her side during meals. If she dropped a toy or began to fuss, Rex would be the first to react, sometimes even before Emily or John noticed. The vet, fascinated by the behavior, explained, "Some dogs form imprint bonds with humans they see as their protector or the one they protect." With everything he's been through, Rex probably found hope in Lily's voice that may have helped him survive. John nodded thoughtfully, and maybe she found something in him too. The wall that once held a secret was now patched and painted, but Emily refused to hang anything over it. Instead, she placed a small wooden plaque above Lily's crib that read, "Rescued by Love." It was a quiet tribute to an unseen connection between two souls who had found each other through a wall, through silence, through something deeper than words. Rex was no longer just a dog in the house. He was part of the family's story, a living reminder that sometimes the past isn't behind us, it's beside us, waiting patiently to be heard. By the end of the first month, Rex had not only adjusted to his new life, he had transformed it. The once quiet Thompson household now felt fuller, warmer, and more alive. Neighbors who had heard the unbelievable story often stopped by to drop off dog treats or ask to meet the miracle dog. But despite the attention, Rex remained focused on the one person who mattered most to him, Lily. The bond between them was unlike anything John or Emily had ever seen. It wasn't just affection, it was devotion. Lily, now crawling more confidently across the house, would always stop to look behind her. If Rex wasn't following, she would turn back, reach out, and wait. And every time, without fail, Rex would get up and follow her quietly, matching her pace. He didn't bark or whine for attention. He didn't chase toys or beg for scraps. His entire focus was on her, always on her. One afternoon, Emily placed Lily on a blanket in the backyard to enjoy the warm sun while she worked in the garden. Lily sat up, clapping her hands, giggling at the fluttering leaves above. Rex lay beside her, head raised, ears twitching at every sound. When a squirrel darted across the fence, Rex stood up sharply, but instead of chasing it, he stood guard between Lily and the fence, watching until the yard was clear again. Emily watched from a distance, amazed. There was no training that could create this kind of loyalty. It was instinct and something more. That evening, as they sat on the couch watching Lily attempt to pull herself up, using Rex's back like a tiny handrail, John chuckled. "He's basically her nanny at this point." Emily nodded. "I've read stories about dogs forming bonds with babies, but this is different. He doesn't just care for her, he trusts her, like he knows she saved him." John glanced at Rex, whose eyes were fixed on Lily with soft alertness. Maybe she did. Maybe they saved each other. One night, as a thunderstorm rolled over the neighborhood, Lily began to cry in her sleep. The rumble of thunder had woken her, and she whimpered softly in the crib. Before Emily could get up from bed, Rex was already padding toward the nursery. He sat beside the crib and let out a low, gentle whine. Within seconds, Lily quieted, and soon she was asleep again. Emily watched through the monitor, tears forming. In her eyes, "He makes her feel safe," she whispered. The next milestone came sooner than expected. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and the family was in the living room. Lily stood holding onto the edge of the couch, babbling excitedly as Rex lay just inches away. Without warning, Lily let go and took 2 unsteady steps, right toward Rex. Her tiny hands reached for his fur, and when she stumbled, he shifted forward gently to support her. She didn't fall. She simply leaned on him, beaming with pride. She walked, John whispered in awe, her first steps. And to him, Emily added, smiling through tears. From that moment, Rex became part of every milestone. First steps, first words, first visits to the park. At the playground, children flocked to pet him, but he stayed close to Lily, always watching, always near. Even her pediatrician noticed. "I've never seen a baby this calm around an animal," she said during a checkup. "Their rhythm is perfectly in sync. It's rare. It was more than rare. It was extraordinary." Emily began journaling everything: the wall discovery, Rex's behavior, Lily's changes, until one day, she received a message from a local journalist who had heard about their story from a neighbor. The woman asked if she could visit and write a piece about Rex and Lily's bond. John hesitated, but Emily said yes. "It's not just a story," she told him. "It's a message about patience, loyalty, trust, and the kind of love that doesn't need words." The article, published under the title "Baby's Bond with Wall-Rescued Dog Defies All Odds," went viral within days. Messages poured in from across the country. People were inspired. Some said they adopted older dogs because of the story. Others simply said it gave them hope. And in the middle of all the noise, Rex and Lily remained as they always were, quietly, inseparably together. The story of Rex and Lily spread far beyond the quiet suburb they called home. What had started as a simple local news article soon caught the attention of national media outlets, animal welfare groups, and online communities. Within a week, the Thompsons were receiving emails and letters from across the country, some from parents, some from soldiers who had worked with service dogs, and many from animal lovers who were simply moved by the story of the gentle German shepherd and the baby who saved him. Despite all the attention, the family kept things simple. They weren't looking for fame. They were just grateful that Rex was safe and that Lily had found a companion unlike any other. Still, the wave of kindness from strangers was impossible to ignore. Boxes began arriving: dog beds, toys, treats, baby books, and even framed drawings of Rex and Lily, sent by children who had read the article with their parents. One afternoon, a small group of neighborhood kids stopped by with handmade cards and a banner that read, "Welcome home, Rex." Emily, deeply touched, invited them into the yard, where Rex lay beside Lily on a soft blanket. The kids approached gently, petting his thick fur and asking a dozen questions about the wall and how he got trapped. Rex responded the way he always did, with calm eyes and a soft tail wag. The story also caught the attention of a local elementary school teacher, who invited Emily and John to speak at their community day event. Hesitant at first, they eventually agreed, and when they arrived with Rex and Lily, the auditorium was filled with clapping children and curious parents. Emily stood at the podium, holding Lily in her arms while Rex sat obediently beside them. She spoke from the heart. "This isn't just a story about a dog in a wall," she said. "It's a story about listening, really listening to the things we often ignore. My daughter couldn't speak, but she knew something none of us did. And Rex, who was alone and afraid, held on until she found him. Sometimes, hope sounds like silence, and sometimes, love comes through a wall." By the time she finished, the room was quiet. Then applause broke out, not for the Thompsons, but for Rex and for the power of quiet, patient love. After the speech, the local veterinarian who had first examined Rex approached with an offer. "We'd like to sponsor Rex's medical care for life," she said. "He's a special dog. What he's done for your daughter, and what she's done for him, it's inspiring. We'd be honored to help." Another offer came from a local dog trainer, who specialized in therapy and service animals. "If you're open to it," he said, "I'd like to begin training Rex formally as Lily's companion dog. He already does it naturally, but we can give him even more tools to help her as she grows." The Thompsons agreed, and Rex began gentle training sessions, learning commands, alerts, and how to navigate different environments with Lily by his side. He picked up everything quickly, as though he had been waiting for this purpose all along. The most unexpected gesture came a few weeks later, when the town council announced that they were dedicating a day in honor of Rex, Hero Dog Day. They called it, and they chose the anniversary of the day he was discovered behind the wall. On the day of the celebration, the park was filled with families, music, booths, and a stage where children read stories about their own pets. Rex was the guest of honor, wearing a small vest with his name embroidered on the side. When it was time for the ceremony, Lily, now toddling confidently, walked up to the stage with him. As the mayor handed Emily a plaque of recognition, Lily raised her tiny hand, pointed at Rex, and simply said, "Best." The crowd melted into cheers and laughter. It was a celebration not just of a dog, but of resilience, loyalty, and the invisible threads that bind lives together. In the months since the wall had been opened, the community had found a shared story, one of faith, quiet miracles, and unexpected heroes. Rex didn't understand the awards, the attention, or the applause. All he understood was that Lily was happy, and he was exactly where he was meant to be. Months passed, and the seasons began to change. The leaves turned gold and orange, and the cool breeze of autumn drifted through the windows of the Thompson home. But inside, something felt timeless. Rex and Lily had grown even closer, their bond now as natural as breathing. Lily was walking full-time now, and though she stumbled often like any toddler learning her way, Rex was always nearby, either pacing beside her or lying patiently where she wanted to sit. He had learned to anticipate her moods, sense her needs, and somehow understand her before words could fully form. One morning, as Emily was tidying up the living room, she overheard Lily giggling in the hallway. She peeked around the corner and saw her daughter waddling along, holding onto Rex's tail like a lifeline. He didn't seem to mind, in fact. He walked slower to match her speed. When they reached the nursery, Lily let go, turned to Rex, and said clearly, "Come." It wasn't just a word. It was a command, soft but sure, and he obeyed instantly. Emily smiled. He's not just a companion, he's her guardian. At Lily's next pediatric visit, her doctor was astonished by her emotional development. She's more expressive than most children her age, the doctor noted, calm, confident, and highly connected to her environment. I'd say that dog plays a big role in that. John and Emily couldn't agree more. There was something about the way Lily looked at Rex, as if she had always known him, even before the wall came down. That invisible line between past and present had blurred, and in that quiet merging, something beautiful had been born. As winter approached, the Thompsons decided to tell the full story, publicly start to finish. A well-known parenting magazine offered to feature them in an in-depth article about healing bonds and the power of intuition between children and animals. The journalist, who had a child of her own, spent a weekend with the family to observe them closely. She watched as Rex gently nudged a sippy cup back toward Lily. When it rolled away, she saw how Lily paused to look for Rex before entering a new room. She even noticed how the dog sometimes stared at the nursery wall in the evenings, as though quietly remembering where he had once waited in darkness. By the end of her visit, the journalist sat with John and Emily on the back porch. "This story isn't about mystery," she said. "It's about trust, a baby's instinct, a dog's loyalty, and a wall that didn't just separate them, it brought them together." When the article was published, the reaction was overwhelming. Readers shared their own stories of animals rescuing children, of unlikely connections, and of how love sometimes finds a way in the most unexpected places. One letter, from a mother in Maine, read, "Your story reminded me that silence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes it means someone is just waiting to be heard." Eventually, the family was invited to speak at a national children's wellness conference, where they shared how Rex's presence helped Lily's development and even reduced stress for the entire household. But for the Thompsons, the most meaningful moments were still the quiet ones, the mornings when Lily crawled into Rex's bed instead of her own, or the evenings when he waited patiently by the tub until she was dried and dressed. One snowy afternoon, as Emily set up the Christmas tree, Lily stood beside Rex, trying to hook an ornament onto his collar. He didn't flinch. He simply waited, letting her tug and fumble, knowing somehow that her happiness was his only task. And then it happened. Lily turned to Emily and said, "Clear as day, he's my best." Emily's heart swelled. It was her daughter's first sentence, and no sentence could have been more perfect. From that moment, it became a phrase the family would repeat over and over. "He's my best," because that's what Rex had become. Not just the dog who had been found behind a wall, not just a miracle survivor. He was a symbol of quiet strength, of waiting, of unconditional love. He was the thread that wove together a child's first words, first steps, and first deep friendship. And though the wall was repaired long ago, the story behind it would never be sealed again. It lived on in every soft post-step beside Lily, in every nap they shared, and in every ordinary day that became extraordinary because Rex was there. Forever. Her best